Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our two lovely guests, Shannon, who is an ENFP, and Michael, who's an INTJ. And they are both 5w4s. And today we will talk about the Type 5. And the Type 5 is called the quiet specialist, or it is called like the observer in certain places too. So Shannon, would you like to tell us about the vice and the virtue of the Type 5?
Right. So the vice of Enneagram 5 is avarice, which is different from greed, similar but different, in that avarice is a little more formal and it's more focused on holding on to more than you need, and whereas greed's kind of more primal, selfish, trying to gain more than you need. And then the virtue is
Omniscience.
Thank you. I'm just tripping over my omniscience.
Yes. So the Type 5 is on a relentless pursuit of knowledge. It's all about knowledge gathering and contemplation and observing and collecting. It's collecting a lot of knowledge. And so that's why their vice is avarice, because they're kind of like collecting all that knowledge and like keeping it in a fortress. Whereas like their virtue is omniscience, because it's like the state of knowing everything. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really awesome. So Shannon, would you like to tell us a bit about the defense mechanism of the Type 5?
So the defense mechanism is isolation, and that can occur in a number of ways, whether through literal like disconnection, isolation from emotion, or literal like unconscious responses to people, or literal pulling away from people in order to isolate.
As a way to protect itself, Type 5s tend to isolate. And so, Shannon, what is the core fear of the Type 5?
So the Type 5's core fear is helplessness, and basically they don't want to be incompetent and they don't want to be useless. So they want to gather up that knowledge base, or at least a knowledge base in something in particular that they can offer.
Thank you for that intro, Shannon. And so that's a little bit on the Type 5. And today we're going to be comparing and contrasting the Type 5 between an INTJ and between an ENFP. But before that, Shannon, I just want to ask you about your opinion between like the difference between MBTI and the Enneagram. What are these systems trying to get at?
Right. So sometimes this can get confusing when you're diving into this stuff and getting excited. MBTI, or like the 16 types, that sort of stuff, is describing the lens through which like you see the world, your intelligence style. And then Enneagram is describing your egoic defense style. So you could be thinking any type of way, but how you defend yourself when you're under stress, still a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm. So it's also my personal belief that MBTI is more about like your cognitive wiring and like just how your brain is wired, and either soft or hard wiring, and through your functions. And the Enneagram is like a coping mechanism that you use in life.
Yes, so, that's a perfect summary.
Very, very cool, Shannon. And so today, we'll just be talking about our types and seeing, the things that Michael and Shannon share together, or the things that they differ. And so I just want to see how similar like an Enneagram type can be across different types. So yeah, thank you guys for showing up. Who wants to get started?
So I'll jump off of that. I mean, there's so much in there to talk about that I honestly like. I'm not sure where to start, but I think something about Type 5 is like our and maybe this is the case for every Enneagram type, but our defense mechanisms and coping strategies can just be a way of life. They don't look like they cannot look outwardly like defensive positions or coping. And I think for like when Shannon's talking about isolation, and there's avoidance and withdrawal, like that can be, I'm interested to hear how it shows up for Shannon there. Maybe we can start there, because as like a very NIFI INTJ, I'm very comfortable in that space, completely isolated in a bubble away from everybody, and just sort of the ability to take refuge in mental space and just live there without feeling deprived of the things you need out in the world. Because another thing about Enneagram 5 is there's this hyper focus a lot of the time on the idea of depletion, whatever that might mean. And I think for INTJs, stereotypically, that's energy depletion and just constant energy management, and this feeling like you have almost like a gas tank that's constantly just winding down, and you have this need to withdraw and recharge. So I think for a lot of us INTJs, that's sort of, that's in the stereotypical, that's in the archetype, right? It's like, it's part of that. So I'm interested to hear about the avoidance and withdrawal and that idea of depletion and how it might show up in an ENFP with the same Enneagram configuration.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's something that's like where I feel like my combination is like a really good example of showing like how these things really are different, or really do influence how the type looks. And like, don't just look and assume and go like, oh, they spend a lot of time alone, so they must be an introvert, or, oh, they said they feel different, so they must be a 4, that kind of thing. How does it show up for me? Like, I definitely, definitely like there's definitely an energetic thing in my head where, whether it's verbalized or not, in the back of my head going, okay, I know what energizes me, which is learning this information. And I have that ongoing obsessive thoughts all day about my things that I love. It doesn't stop. Like, you can't have a conversation with me and I'm satisfied. And like, next thing, like, this is constant. So that's what energizes me. That's what brings up my energy. Everything else outside of it depletes me. All of it. So when I'm leaving that bubble and I'm going, okay, I only have this much time before I lose all my energy and ability to like focus on things like I don't want to focus on. And certain things will drain me a lot faster. So there's always that in the back of my head. I feel like I'm loading up psychologically, like preparing to go out into a war zone. Or like going out into like space without a helmet, going like, okay, how long can I do this without breathing?
So that's I think very interesting, because I relate so much to most of that. But I think a difference that I would draw here is that actually taking in information, which is something that I do a lot, I spend the majority of the day doing it, is actually, it can deplete me often. It's organizing the information that gives me energy. It's not taking it in. So I need to externalize it myself, and then have some place to put it, something to do with it. And I could do that for all day if I'm sitting there with what I have. But there's such an obsessive drive to get more that there's like, I feel like I'm at war. Exactly. So I feel like I wish there's this like completely delusional sense for me where it's like, okay, as soon as I have it all, I'll be able to only organize it. As soon as I have all of the information, you know what I mean? How many hundreds of hours of YouTube that's uploaded every minute, you know what I mean? Or even second. But I can get it all. I'll have all the information. I'll have the whole library of Alexandria here, and I can, and then I can just do whatever I will with it, and there will be no more information. You know what I mean? Like, you feel like there's an endpoint and you're driving towards some conclusion. At least I do. But you're never going to get there. So there's this balance that I need to draw between like consuming information and doing something with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for me, I could actually, like, if I was just there with one other person and just pinging talking about it or imagining it in different scenarios, applying it to different scenarios, I could literally never run out of gas.
Which is, see, and I think there's two things there when it comes to like MBTI and Enneagram, because when you say pinging it with another person, that's very NE, and it's also very sexual subtype, right?
Yep.
So like what I think is like I'm NI and I relate to all the subtypes, but I test out at social, and it's probably my most like balanced space between the three. It depends. There's a lot I could say about that, but I feel like, I mean, the NI space, I really enjoy pinging things off of people, but that's not like, I mean, I think functionally, primarily, like literally taking a nap with it, letting things drift, meditating, whatever it is that puts you like brings me toward more of a like isolated, like almost subconscious space, and just seeing the gears turn and just turning things over. That's a space that I would be, I mean, I'm at my best when I have a good balance of like taking in information, sharing it with people and pinging it off of others, and also just lying there and letting it drift. But I do less personally of the lying there and letting it drift. I've gotten better at this, but I do less of it than I feel like I should, just because like there's always this obsession with getting more.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I feel like the word pinging might be used in different ways from the both of you. Like I think like Michael with your TE is known for talking it out loud, and it needs to ping. Whereas when Shannon says that she pings with people, I think it's more of her NE. So it's like ping, 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 ping. But it's like you're using the same word, but in different ways. And so, yeah, it's really cool, Michael, how like you like to have all the information, but like you like to structure it for an end goal too. So I feel like that's really like judgery of you. Like it's very NITE, because it's like your NI is a perceiving function, so it wants to perceive all the information, but it's for like the TE purpose of like using it for something, the ends of something. And so that's really cool. And so yeah, I'm just loving the conversation. Just want to chime in.
Yeah, I can I mean, I like to be able to apply things eventually. Part of my thinking, like I'd say it's like an NETE working together a little bit of understanding how it could apply. Well, yeah, that's more NE. How it could apply, so that when I do want to actually TE apply, I can go, okay, I know which ones to use.
So it sounds like it's always in the back of your mind, like the applying. See, that's always in the front of my mind. So it's almost like switched between the two of us. That's always in the front of my mind. And then and that was very NI of Joyce. Let's just dork out for a second to clarify how we're using the word pinging, because that totally makes sense. Because with TE, in pinging something, I mean, it can develop an idea and it can be very interesting, but it's primarily just the sense of moving this thing forward, moving something forward, you know, so that that's something that's energizing for me. It's not the actual thing itself, but it's like, okay, there's progress happening here. Whereas it can feel like that it's more natural, I feel, to do it in isolation, but it can also feel like something stalling. And then there's a panic that sets in where that sets me out to like, I need more. And then I can burn out on that. So I think the NETE pinging thing is a good similarity and differentiation, because it probably looks the same from the outside. The conversation is probably the same.
Oh yeah, I get accused of being NI or like INFJ all the time. Like, no, you guys have no idea. No.
Yeah. But by the way, guys, Shannon is definitely not an INFJ, said by an INFJ. So
is there controversy about this? Hang on a second. Time out. Yeah. There is. I love this community. It's great.
Well, I think it has to do a little, like, honestly, I do think it has to do with my fiveness, because I can have that quieter overall removed persona. And then when you're thinking so long about, even though I don't get to the conclusion quickly the way NI does, I'm still like constantly ruminating on these same subjects for such a long time that I do get to some sort of conclusion that can kind of sound NI-ish.
I feel like the difference is, like Denzel told me before, like that NE and NI can get to the same conclusion. But like, okay, so my personal take on it is that like NE is more thought experiment E. So when you talk to them, they literally will go through all the possibilities, even the absurd ones. So when you talk to them, like it's this like impersonal type of pattern finding. Like, you know, Dave Superpowers calls it the guesser. So it's like their guesser is way more impersonal in the sense that like they go to territories that the NI user would not naturally go. And I'm like, there's just I don't know how to explain it, but I just can feel the difference when they're thinking. Also, awesome conversation so far. Any other thoughts come to mind, guys?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to like the beginning of the video. There's a point that I thought was interesting when Shannon was introducing Enneagram and like our configuration, and you got, I hope you don't mind me calling this out, you got lost on the idea of omniscience. And it wasn't just like I can't find the word or I can't pronounce the word. There was more of just like you sort of drifted there, it looked like. And I remember a point, Joyce, when we were recording the INTJ INTP video with Tim, where I called myself out for doing kind of the same thing and having like an NI panic about like completely this like mortifying fear of completely losing my train of thought. And it's another thing that I think looks the same from the outside, like that kind of freezing up. But it might be good to clarify like between, and by the way, for everyone watching, like I've talked to Shannon. Shannon is not an INFJ. Okay, so let's just nail this down. Period. Okay. And I think that we can draw the difference between like the kind of any freezing up or maybe bottleneck or however that looks for Shannon and how it looks for NI DOMs. So I don't know if Shannon, I don't know if you like have something to sound off.
That was a really good observation. Thank you. Yes, actually, like this is a thing that happens to me. I think it's partially my NE and partially like the 5 avarice going on, in that I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I have like always like at least 5 different thoughts just sitting right here ready to go, or info I want to give you. And I go like, okay, but like what should I be giving them, when, and how much energy do I want to spend here? Or like, is that going to be the best choice to spend of like expenditure at the time? So sometimes I'll just kind of go like, ugh. And by the time I go to make a decision, I feel like the moment's lost. So I just like stay quiet. I don't have that like NI judgery, like, yeah, just this one now. Yep.
So it seems like you have trouble choosing a thought. So you have 5 in your head, and the freezing comes from, ooh, which one could I choose? Like, I don't know which one is the best to choose in this scenario.
Yep.
And so that's where the freezing comes. It's the bottleneck, the famous NE bottleneck, where they kind of pause or they can't answer because there are too many options and like they don't have the ability to like, I mean, they don't know how to like choose which one they'd like at the moment.
That would be deciding and closing off options.
So this is a really interesting point, I think, because what happens with Shannon, and I've seen you do this a few times right now, is you just like stop. You just like it looks like you just hit pause on Shannon when that happens, right? And what's happening inwardly is like there's too much going on, and you can't decide which thing is like which thing is next. For me, I don't freeze up. I keep talking, but I'm in a like absolute panic mode because I have nothing. And it's just like, I'm just like, well, we gotta put something out there. So I just start talking. So it's like, I mean, I feel like it almost looks different than either of our stereotypes because like, and Joyce, I'm not sure if you relate to this as like an NI Dom as well. Like if something comes to me and like, it's not, I don't have that thing there, I have nothing there. I have like, that's why I have notes on everything. Let me tell everybody, I have notes on what we're talking about right now. I'm not just rattling things off. I mean, it's just an outline. It's like I'm reading something off, but I need something to anchor me in a conversation like this, because otherwise like that feeling of freezing up is the worst feeling, because like for me, I've got nothing. And I've been in situations where like, wait a minute, I've got nothing and nothing comes up. And I just call it out. I suddenly have to have a meta conversation with everybody. Like, guys, this happens sometime, literally nothing up here.
Yeah. Whereas like, I'm literally like, I've got so much here. I'm like, thank you, everybody. Like, please let me offload some of this. But at the same time, like, there's no direction. So if you just say, speak freely, or just say whatever you want, like, I'll take over the whole conversation. I'll be talking in like circles, or really more than circles, just in all kinds of crazy directions. No one's going to know what I'm talking about. No one's going to be able to keep up. so yeah, it ends up being like a completely different thing, though it can look similar. I do not have notes. I just have tons of stuff like right here going, yes, please release.
Yes, the any user has a really active mind. And so like the reason why they freeze up is they have trouble narrowing down. So because there's so much inside, it's cluttered and they can't narrow it down.
Sometimes when people like literally ask me a question, or like give me like a very like straightforward like direction or something like that, I'm like, thank you God. Like,
yes. Yes. I remember during our episodes together, you'd go like, Joyce, you have to ask the right questions or else you won't get that right material out of me. And I was like, that's interesting, because with judges, like, okay, I know okay, I don't want to make broad generalizations, but this is just a general trend I see. Like, with Shannon, she kind of need to prompt the right questions to get the right material out of her. Whereas I think sometimes judges like Michael, they come in with something to share already. So like, although good questions are okay, like they also already have prepared a certain amount of material that they'll figure out a way to weave into the question, even if I'm not directly asking about it. So I know that's a weird differentiation. I don't know how to
it's
put
a
it into
very
words.
good differentiation.
Let me just elaborate on that just a little bit on my end, because like,
sure.
I prepare too much. I do prefer the questions, because then I have a structure that I can compare. I'm going to go through about maybe 10% of what I have in this outline here, these bullet points. But I need too much. I need something to be able to bounce to. I need an anchor at these things. I don't have the any like
Cool.
at any point. Let's just go. I'm a little jealous of it, to be honest.
Yeah. I wonder if like judging functions like FITE, FETI are like anchors in the terms of they give you a way to like put all of what you're perceiving into something. So maybe as perceiver DOMs, it's hard to like put it into a structure. But yes, Michael, I completely relate to like, if I lose my train of thought, I have nothing. So I have no idea what to say if I lose it. But yeah, that's an interesting differentiation. What are your thoughts, guys?
I thought that was really on point. Yeah. It almost seems too like the differences are almost like ingrained, like purposeful like gaps so that we can like fit into each other, you know?
Yeah, we're all a part of this ecosystem of type, and we all help each other fill in roles. So yeah.
So I'm doing it right now. I got nothing.
Oh. Something you said that was I thought about that was kind of interesting, because you said, you kind of related to the social subtype. I mean, that's a whole thing, but that's on its own thing. But I noticed people in the head type triad, like the people in the heart type triads, like 3s, 4s, 2s, there's almost like this mentality about them, kind of going back to the little kid trying to please their parent, when that affection that they didn't get in all of their interactions. And with head types, it's more like a school age kid now looking at the whole tribe, which is like the representation of the world for them, going like, what do I do? And trying to find like their role in surviving in the world. So like, even if you kind of have like, even if a head type is like social instinct last, there's still this little bit of a thing about like a social flavor to their orientation in the world, in defense. I don't know if that
Yeah, no, I'm trying to put words to it. I mean, I feel like with the social 5, it's like you're driven toward the group as a survival strategy. For me, it's like I'm driven toward the group just because I know that I need it, because I know that on the other the other side of the coin is the abyss,
Right.
But at the same time, it's like there's still this feeling of being outside the group and even driven away from the group. And it's hard to interpret some of these things, because so much of it also goes to my relationship with the 4 type. And like I mean, it's like when I feel like where I feel driven toward like 4 tendencies is like also where I feel like actually the sexual 5 makes sense for me, So sometimes it's hard to disentangle these when you really get like under the surface of these things. And then there's the self-preservation, which is like, I mean, the idea of boundaries and the idea of refuge, I mean, so much of this comes out of fear. That's where all of this is based in fear, right? For us. And like, I totally relate to that, but it's just a very unhealthy version of myself, who I have been for long stretches of time. So I relate to that as well, as far as the self-pres subtype goes. So it's
sure.
like,
we all definitely have all the instincts.
I mean, I think of this sort of conflict aversion in the self-pres type, which I do not have. I am not a conflict averse person, so that's one where I wouldn't
like, let's
identify.
I'm so ready.
Yeah. But I'm wondering about Shannon, and I don't know, maybe we can go down this path, is like your relationship to the sexual 5, because I know that you feel very squarely within that subtype, which is the, some call the counter type, right? For our type.
Yep. Because 5s generally, don't want that like intimacy and closeness, because that would take away the independence. But the sexual instinct really wants to merge with that buddy to be like, we got each other. So it's a very conflicted combination. How do I describe it? Like when I was younger, it was just a matter of me kind of idealizing, even in recent years, it's me like idealizing me trying to come up with the perfect formula of like type combination compatibility, which doesn't really, like, there's tendencies, there's no real answer. And part of me in my brain here is going, yes, there is. You'll find it. You'll figure it out. There's a whole math. Whatever. But as I'm getting older and more self-aware, I kind of realize, like, I'm realizing the conflict more, in that I'm really like in my world. I really like doing my thing, which is like being in my theory world and working on it and developing that. And that's really all I want to do. And I realize, like, when you try to merge with somebody in the sexual instinct way, or the even just in real life romance, like, yes, like there is a beauty and a huge advantage of expanding the horizons of your life with this person, but there is a degree to which, like, there is a degree of sacrifice, and there's a degree of you can't be in this all day. You do have to like share with somebody else. They can't like literally be you and theorize with you all day. They have to have their own interests, and you kind of have to like dampen your interests a little bit, just a little bit, so that you can take part in theirs, and vice versa. And that's really, I discovered, like, oh, that's really hard for me. And that's probably part of my 5 isolating without consciously realizing that I'm doing it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have like a soulmate fixation, which is like I don't know, like maybe the part, maybe the part that you relate to SX is that like need for that like soulmate searching that is just intrinsic to you that you can't really erase. So
Yep.
maybe.
Oh yeah, like the minute I'm very selective about the people I choose to be in my little close bubble, and when any of that shifts, I freak out and I start like you've probably heard my rants, Joyce, like me going like, I'll never find my soulmate. I can't have my soulmate. I shouldn't. I need to, like, I don't let it go. It gets me like really upset. Even if I've technically been single for like 4 years now, something, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that at this point. And there's still like that obsession in the back of my head, and I have to like quiet it down. Like, don't be nuts. This is just your SX fixation. You don't really want that right now. Like, don't just leap in. Like, that's like a little over the top.
So I think there's an interesting correspondence here, because like, okay, so then outwardly, like, we've had the same experience where I've also gone years at a time, like, not in a relationship. And I know, like, there are so many people who like, this is that, like, it's a constant jumping from relationship to relationship. But like, I think for us, there's that idea of, a commitment of energy and a commitment of self, and also that idea of depletion that we're always trying to avoid, where there's so many contradictions and conflicts within all of these. I mean, between the function polarities and within Enneagram types. I mean, that it's like, I feel like a lot of the time we have like a personal growth focus, obviously, in this community, but the idea of growth as like progressing through stages and growing is less interesting to me than this idea of conflict, like, within ourselves. This idea of like, it's this dialectical thing of like, there are contradictions that are always working themselves out. And it's like, it's a more conflict oriented way of looking at, I guess, what you might call growth or progress. But sorry, I feel like I want to get really just like meta philosophical now about like
that sounds like Carl Jung. What Carl Jung's talking about with psychological integration. Like, you have to be aware of those conflicts happening inside yourself. Like, that's what part of the maturation process is realizing those conflicts and resolving them so that they can all simultaneously exist. It doesn't mean you're a perfect person or a psychic or anything else. You're just aware, and you're finding solutions so that you can, be a functional person in the world.
Yeah. And it's not, I don't even see it as like resolution between opposing forces. I mean, there's a synthesis within like, they're both going to be there. There's always going to be a drive to merge with somebody and also be completely alone. But it's like, it's not one versus the other. It's like those things work together to make something else. This is where it gets really abstract, I think. But like,
that's also what creates passion, which makes the relationship different and closer, ironically.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just the idea of being alone always is a nightmare. And the idea of like metaphysically merging with somebody is like just body horror. Like, it's horrible. You know what I mean? But it's both. It's not, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the formula for aliveness. You learn from, Esther Perel and those like relationship coaches that it's really about not separating the two opposites, but it's like Michael said, it's like integrating them, so there's a synthesis. And so like sometimes in our brain we create false dichotomies, like, well, like we have the part of ourselves that we accept and the part that we reject, but it's more of it doesn't have to be that way. Human beings, they think like us versus them a lot, but it's not true. It's more of you need to synthesize the me, the us, and the them, and to make it like one. Because like when you take it away from the one, then you're creating like a false dichotomy that doesn't exist, and it's harmful because you're rejecting a facet of life. And so you're always going to get that boomerang effect. It's going to come and hit you like a boomerang. If you reject one part, it's always going to come back and hit you right back.
Yep.
So you always have to integrate these parts of you. Carl Jung lesson 101.
Very well said too.
Can we go to like and this is kind of a different track, but I'm wondering just sort of between the two of us, how we respond emotionally to argument or conflict, because I think there's a
that would be very interesting. I've actually, yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you at some point, and I just never remembered to ask.
Yeah, a lot of things that come up about the 5 in Enneagram is that we're kind of imperturbable in a way, more so than other types, or can be. And I was referring to this in another video, Joyce, that we did about INTJs specifically, like having the ability to be sort of untriggerable to a large extent. And for me, that's about, and I think it's inherent in the 5 type as it's laid out, which is like abstracting from emotional reactivity. For me, a lot of the time, that's like, it's almost like aesthetic distance, like distanciation. And there's this, it's like there's this, the best way I can describe it is there's this sort of gap between consciousness and reality always. And I feel when there's a point where emotions are going to interfere with something, and that's a little too sensitive for me to, like, this kicks in more often than it probably should, but that it's like that gap widens, that gap between consciousness and reality. And it's like, it's almost like another kind of refuge where, like, I can be embedded in a situation where, like, I should be more emotionally, like, responsive to this, and this is TE as well, it's not useful right now. So there's that distance that opens up, and it can open up so wide. And I don't know, Shannon, if you've had this experience where, like, it gets to a point of dissociation, where, like, it widens so much that it's almost like an out of body.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're totally detached, and it's almost like watching myself from, like, a third person perspective.
Absolutely.
How do you relate to all of this?
Oh, I relate to that a lot. Though there's definitely subjects or like moments where I can get upset and walk away, kind of thing. But it's not because I don't know what I'm talking about, or because, like, I'm so triggerable. It's because, like, I'm like a stickler about facts, and I don't know, there's a snobbishness in there, in that, like, for instance, when I get argued about with politics, I get really upset because they're not looking, like, what I detect immediately is they're not looking to have a discussion and share ideas or, like, learn something. They're not looking to find facts or, like, find information or even get to know me, like, ideologically or ontologically. They're what they're doing, they're not sharing those things. They're sharing opinions, and opinion is just like your personal attachment or, like, interpretation of facts and attachment to it. And that's not this, and sharing opinions or arguing about opinions is usually what a lot of people do in politics, like when they're talking about politics, people who aren't in politics, obviously. And they're not looking to have that discussion. They're just looking for an outlet. Like, I can tell they're just looking to, like, use me emotionally as a punching bag, rather than actually, like, TE effectively do something about their opinion or about their feelings and, like, manage their feelings. They literally just want to use me, and use me in an abusive way. So, like, I get very, very upset and stonewall them or leave, kind of thing. So that can look like sensitivity to conflict, but it's not that. Like, I'm literally, like, that's me not wanting that emotional burden, not wanting to take care of them emotionally in that way. And yeah, a lot of times, like, yeah, there is that large dissociative quality in my life. Sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it. Like, I have, like, one of my best friends is an ESFP4 who's, all emotion. I remember one time, for the first time, I had seen her for the first time in a long time, and she just cried with joy because she was so happy to see me and hug me. And I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, I miss you too. And I like kind of could like observe the emotion inside me, but like nothing was happening. And I was like, oh, heck, like I can't do it. I can't just pure feel something. It always hits me later, like after I just like, and I just kind of observe it. Every once in a blue moon, I'll be like, okay, I kind of need to like dump this out. And I'll sit there for like hours. It'll take me a whole day to actually like get tears or like something out of me to be like, okay, that's good. Get it out of your body. Moving on. And I hate it. It's like a painful, gross experience.
Wait, what does that look like for you though? Like, is that something that you're working toward, or does it hit you spontaneously, or what's like the approach to that look like?
To me, like exercising the emotion out of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the exorcism, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, that's literally what it is. I'm like, I just want this, because I'll observe it and I'll be done with it and I'll be like, cool. It's just like motions are just kind of like a radio frequency, like playing in the background while I'm going, yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, I'll be like, when's the last time you, like every few months or something, I'll be like, when's the last time you cried? Have you been anxious lately? Not sleeping? Well, I usually don't. I'm up. I'm like, yay, everyone's gone. No people energy. But if I'm like particularly restless, or I've checked in every few months and realized like I haven't cried or like had any kind of like emotional like anything, haven't shouted into a pillow or something, but I'm like, yeah, you kind of got to do that, because it'll start like making, I know from working on people as like a body worker, how that can accumulate in your body and make you hurt or make you sick. So it's like, okay, I just kind of have to do that. And it's a whole process because it takes me a long time. Like, I'm not in my heart. Despite being like a ENFP, I'm just not, that's not my experience of emotion. So I kind of have to like think about whatever might be upsetting or something that could be upsetting, or just go like FISI, go through a loop of things that might bother me. Because I'll know, like I'll have experiences day to day, and then later on, like that night, be like, wait a second, that pissed me off. But like, there's still no like, ah. I'm just like, oh, I understand now. I am upset. There we go. Problem solved. But yeah, when I'm actually getting it out of me, like I have to do it for like hours. And then finally, like I'll get a little bit of like tears or something, and I freaking hate it. It hurts, but I make myself do it for my health.
That's really interesting. Yeah, yeah, fascinating. Heidi Parib, she says that like for ENFPs, when they feel, it's after the event. Like, so it's like in the moment, it's never as strong as when they reflect on it after. So I think that might have a bit to do with it. Definitely, it's a part of the 5 too. But I'm just like
yeah,
factors too. And I'm like, also the numbing out emotional responses also comes from being a jaded person too. Like when the world is kind of like harsh and it's like, nope, this is too much. Feeling is too much work. Some of the type 5 description to me sometimes sounds like a jaded person who's been through too much, and then like they give up on feeling fully. So it's they crutch on research, like they crutch on something that is less emotionally, has to invest a part of them. Does that make sense? It's almost like it's easier to put themselves into an activity where they don't have to feel directly stuck in their emotional sphere. So then because anything there just usually jades them. So then they're used to just activity outside of that. I hope that made sense.
I had like, yeah, it does. I have like three thoughts bouncing in my head right now of like where that kind of comes from with me personally. One, I'm the only feeler in my immediate family that I grew up with. So like, and I'm a really sensitive person. Believe it or not. And enough sensitive, really. So I think I kind of felt like that was too much for them, and I was trying to be like good and like manage my own feeling and like expressions to like not be overwhelming to them, because I felt overwhelmed. You know, like it was a mirroring thing. Like I felt overwhelmed by their overwhelm by my feelings. So I kind of like learned to dial it down a lot and kind of like at least shut down the expression of it. Then there was like, number two was like, I read about this in my acupuncture book when my acupuncture studies, when we were talking about water types who have an issue with fear. That was really, really, it was just so 5-ish and enlightening in that, like, when you are stuck in fear too much or too long, you disconnect, your mind disconnects from your instincts and that animal body, which is feeling things and reacting in like a wise, like instinctual way. So there was kind of that. And then like, I lost the last one.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Shannon. Yeah.
Oh,
I wonder if
I got it.
I wonder if okay, for sure.
I'm sorry. Number three.
It happened again. It just happened again. We talked about this earlier.
Like more of them came back. I had like more thoughts coming, but like, no, those are not relevant right now.
NI versus NE. With NE, it comes back. With NI, if it's gone, it's gone.
Well, you have to like stay on, kind of backed away from information and like things going on, and even your own emotions, in order to look objectively at things. So even if you have like this really great FI intention of like, I want everybody to feel good, so I'm going to solve the problem, you're still going to like step back away from your feelings, away from the people, away from the situation, so that you can look like.
That's the thing. That's what I was trying to get at earlier. That's a different way of looking at that gap opening up. It's like we have some amount of conscious control of that, I think, where we can abstract from the situation to a certain extent. But then there's also everything's still coming in. So when you talk about you need to deal with it later, because my experience with that, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Your thought came back. Was that the thought, or was there something else? I don't want to.
No, that was the thought. That was a total
okay. Thought. I feel, because in those situations where like things are coming in and I have to deal with them later, that's where I'll sort of lean toward 4. Mm-hmm. That's where it's like it becomes more aesthetic. I mean, that's where like my more artistic side comes out. You could drum up an intensity for that with that, and it's almost like it's like material to work with. And there's a rich fantasy space there too, so I can also escape to that. I mean, you're almost, when you're talking about like the exorcism, kind of like performing your own exorcism, that's like, directly confronting the thing, and like it's cathartic thing where you let it out. I can sort of abstract into like fantasy space, and it's almost, there's like a romanticism about it too. So it's like there's also that route. And sort of, I don't do the exorcism thing, but maybe it's a different way of talking about the same kind of catharsis. I don't know. Or maybe it's also avoidance itself. I don't
know. I mean, even that in itself seems kind of NI-ish, just to like be able to imagine the scenarios around it and relate to that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I also like see the type 5 maybe like forming in different ways too. So like for the ENFP, like for Shannon, like maybe it came from an initial feeling like too much for the people around you, and like that's where maybe the 5 starts like becoming stronger in you. And so, but I think for INTJs, I think it's normally not because they're too much, but if it is, it's a different kind of too muchness that the ENFPs give. Because the ENFPs, like Heidi talks about it too, like they're too much for like they're too much for the people around them, because like their heart is too big, and they're like their minds are too questioning and curious for their surroundings around them. And so they end up being too much, and that can cause like a 5-ness, because they're like, well, okay, if you can't handle me, then maybe I'll just isolate. And so the isolation comes in, but for a different reason than maybe an INTJ.
Right. It's like, it's cool, I'll go entertain myself.
And I think the INTJ sort of let me try to put this into words. So with what Shannon's describing, it's like, it's almost like catching up with emotion. It's like something comes in and you deal with it later. With NI and with INTJs, I feel like we're in front of it. So it's like if there's a conflict scenario, if I'm in an argument and I know where you're coming from, then I can draw that out to like what potential for like emotional like turbulence is there here, and then you can put a wall up there so that you feel like that's just going to get deflected. You know what I mean? So if that makes sense. So I actually don't know how much of that comes in and is bottled up and I have to deal with later, and how much is actually like, if I put a shield up here, then that's sort of I'm abstracted from that thing that can come in, because I can just sort of see it coming.
That's
If
really
that makes sense.
fascinating. Yeah, I also think it has to do with your higher up TE, Michael, because TE has an anticipatory quality to it. So what you're doing is you're anticipating what it will do to your FI, so you don't have to deal with the turbulence, because there's a type of predicting the usefulness of something TE has. So if that emotional reaction is not useful, it'll try to steel wall it. But I think maybe for the ENFP it might be different. So
Yeah,
Shannon.
I'll share one of my secrets right now for everyone to see, that I've never like actually told, which is that a lot of times I can look a lot more emotive and like involved than I actually am as a person, or like just know how to respond to emotional situations, or like say much things. It's not because I'm organically like, oh, like that's, I mean, I do care, but that's like not me. Like I don't have that in the moment emotional responsiveness. I've actually studied everything there was. Like I studied emotions like a lot. I studied micro expressions. I studied exactly everything to expect in different situations, ways that people might react, and like what tool sets I can use at any time to react, so that I don't get caught by surprise. Like I'm ready to go.
Exactly the same. I mean, typically, like outside of this conversation, I'd say it's a very INTJ thing to say. Maybe it's a very 5 thing to say. I don't know. It's like figuring that stuff out, like actually making a conscious effort and making it like cerebral intellectual work.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Because I know that about myself. I know I'll like retreat, and I've learned like when I was younger, hey, a lot of people freak out and get angry with me because, and I get more reactivity because I'm not responding, or I'm not giving them the emotion that they want or the response they want. And sometimes they want the feeling sandwich, or they want whatever. So if I know how to do that ahead of time, one, it doesn't, like, I'm prepared for the situation. I'm not caught off guard. I can handle the world. Two, like, I don't, yeah, like I won't totally disengage because I can mentally engage it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's an anxiety that this is coming from, that I feel like this is where our types overlap then. Because there's a I mean, for me, it's like there is a social anxiety there and an awkwardness there that comes from that. It's both the experience, like the lived experience of being like apart from the world when you're in it, that third person thing. And it's like, yeah, it's a fear of that happening, because it's like, so I need like resources. I need cerebral resources that I can fall back on, so that when I'm there, then I'm on a stage. You know what I mean? And it's like you need the script at that point. You need to internalize that script.
Yep.
And it's like, and it looks like it. If you practice, like, it looks like the real thing.
Yeah. Yep.
It's interesting. It's interesting. So this kind of overlaps with the concept of mirror neurons. So there are certain neurons in your mind that fire, so then you can mimic the expressions of the people around you, or just like become and like emote like them. But I think maybe type 5s, like they might have like less mirror neurons, which cause them to need to study emotion to be able to express it, because like, okay, so because what it seems like here, that the reason why I say that is because like what you guys are saying is like that emoting in a way that other people receive well, it doesn't come naturally, and that it has to be like a learned thing, and it's associated with the scientific concept of mirror neurons, which it kind of sounds like FE too. So like also, but I think maybe like INTPs who are 5s also like to study like micro expressions too. So it could be a
with the
5.
FE lower in the stack. But see, that's okay. Let me just, sorry to interrupt, but I don't think it's that. See, that's an interesting. I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here in this conversation is stuff that looks the same as other things, but is something else. Like within our types and the way that Shannon and I are interacting with them, and even this sort of thing, because it's like with the mirror neurons, yes, that sounds like, I interpret that as FE. That sounds like a very FE thing. Whereas this seems like something else. It's like I think the fact is that those aren't firing. Those stop firing. You know what I mean? So I need to for me, I need to fall back to something else, where it's like, I think it's a different part of the brain, if you want to look at it that way. Yeah.
I was gonna say that would just requires a different type of focus. Like if I'm comfortable enough with another person, I mean, yeah, I could probably do that, but like usually 99% of the time when I'm out with people, like my focus isn't even on the emotion. I've got my ongoing stream of thoughts, and or even if I do like kind of notice the emotion happening in the room, I'm still kind of like trying to interpret that. So so there's no just like natural me letting myself go and like, ooh, feeling circle. So the only way for me to like hack that is I guess I don't know. It's just like a mindset or a different part of the brain, or a certain go with the flow.
Yeah. Okay. I actually think like all three perspectives make sense together. So like I think that it is a different part of your brain that is activated, and it could be like the type 5 part of your brain that is activated. I don't like, maybe if Dario Nardi expanded his research to also brain scanning type 5s, maybe we discover where it was. But I also think the mirror neurons is a thing too, because like then I'm confused as to what because my TI is like it's feeling cognitive dissonance from it not making complete sense to me yet. So I'm trying to flesh it out now. So
maybe we also like get the input for the mirror neuron, but like whether or not we use that is like, or how or when might be another thing with.
Yeah, and just to say, I wasn't invalidating your point. I don't know how mirror neurons work. I don't know anything about them. I'm just saying like the idea of something like that just firing spontaneously doesn't sound like what happens. I mean, it could be the same thing. I don't know what's going. Just I'm not interested in like brain science. So like this kind of stuff is just sort of okay. Like that's fine. I think, and again, this isn't to invalidate your point, but I just feel like maybe we need to do something else to like activate that. You know what I mean? Like it's not, I feel like it sounds like with higher stack FE that would just happen the way that you're describing it, that would be a thing that that mirror neurons would just activate. You know what I mean? I feel like they just, at least for me, like they just don't. I feel such a lack of FE that it's like there's so much anxiety that comes from that also leads again to that withdrawal and isolation. Yeah.
Yep.
How's that TI cognitive dissonance? Is it like, is that a panic mode? Like,
I have it every day. but yeah, it's like I need things to like make sense, like, and I can't leave it with like a hole in my rationalization. It feels wrong. Like if people have if people have two paradoxical claims together, I need to figure out how they go together, or else I need to keep sifting until it makes sense. So
can I jump in here? Because I Shannon, how do you relate to that versus like, because I would say the exact opposite. I would say that like, not like I can hold space for cognitive dissonance and actually kind of enjoy it. I'd like to accept the mystery there. But I know that a lot of TI users like would say, Joyce, what you just said. But I'm wondering, Shannon, where you fall on that.
I actually do the same thing.
Which?
Like, I want to know, well, kind of, like, I want to know, I do want to know how things come together. And I'll kind of obsess with, like, how does this make sense? How does that make sense? And I'll kind of, like, sort. But I guess there's an NI, though, at the end of the day, like, coming together, whereas I'm kind of going, okay, no, this is the main thing. And they were kind of wrong in this part. And right in this part, and we can put that in here. And yeah, I just try to make sure I actually, if I'm sitting there and I'm not understanding like why there's that dissonance or something, then I'm gonna like go research the hell out of it and then make a decision about like what makes sense and what doesn't. But I kind of do it like I usually don't go back and say like, hey, so you were wrong. Let me tell you all about your wrongness. It's because I think, people kind of have to have people live in their own reality and they have to have their reality, and it's not up to me to like dictate how they express their identity or their whatever unless they're asking me to.
Yeah, I would say like I don't correct people normally too when I see cognitive dissonance, but I know it right away when they say something that has contradicted something they've said, and like, so I'm highly aware of when like two statements cannot go together, or they need to be like parsed through more finely for it to go together.
Yeah, I don't have that part.
I mean, when it comes to cognitive dissonance, I feel like it goes to, at the most cosmic scale, right? Something every 14-year-old has thought, which is like, how can the universe have an end, right? Like, what's the, like, how far can you go? Because our minds are structured in a way where like space is finite and everything has a beginning and an end, and like time marches forward at a measurable pace. But at the same time, there's a knowledge that whatever's out there can't, like, it can't be finite, but we can't comprehend the idea of it not being finite. So I think all cognitive dissonance sort of spins out to that concept. And it's like, that's something that, the way I think about it is considering the fact that we need to hold those two ideas in our mind, then any like contradictory ideas, like there has to be some space for them. That's how I think of it. So it's always interesting to hear the more like common sense kind of view of, these things don't fit together. I need to figure this out.
Yeah, I remember being like 7, 8 years old and going like, how is it that things die, but the universe keeps going?
And we know that time isn't, well, okay, I can't. We're going on. I'm really interested to see the comments on this and how like fives react to this and how everyone else receives this conversation.
Like, I guess like it's interesting though. Like, I wouldn't view like TI as common sense. I would see it as like I would see it as what it is like I'm taking what you're saying and I'm comparing it to the totality of everything I know. So compared to the truth value of all like the truths I've known before, I can know if your statement is true based off the truths that I've amalgamated as universal, or as like, that makes no sense, but I have no idea how to say. So
I want that. I want your TI.
yeah, so awesome. Any other things you guys want to talk about before we end this off?
So much, but I mean, I think that's a lot for now. Yeah.
Maybe we can have like a part 2 of this too. But yeah, it was great chatting, you guys. It's always great hanging out with type 5s. You guys are like knowledge banks. You guys are human like storehouses of gold nuggets, and like who doesn't like human storehouses of the like omniscient omniscient
Run.
Omnisciousness. Omnisciousness.
Why am I
omniscience? It's omniscience.
Omniscience. Omniscience. Yes. So thank you for having that virtue of omniscience. Like, guys,
you're welcome.
Omniduck.
Omniduck.
There we go. Some Emmys for you.
So yeah. Thanks for being my intellectually heady friends. Whenever I want to discuss something and have it teared apart by people, I'd rather bring it to anyone else. I'm kidding.
I feel bad about that all the time. People say to me, I've been hearing this lately, of going, okay, so are you gonna like, are you okay with this subject before like I present it to you, because I know you're gonna rip it apart? I'm like, oh, do I do that? Oh, I do that.
Yeah, type 5s do rip apart concepts with so type 5s are awesome because that's the process of getting better. So thank you guys for helping people with their process of getting better. And thank you for just being awesome friends of mine. I always appreciate our friendships. So thank you, Michael and Shannon. You guys are excellent friends. 10 out of 10 would friend again. I don't know.
You too,
I'm so sorry. But thanks for thanks for talking type with me, and making space for this hobby that we all share. It's always like a pleasure to talk. And thank you, audience members, for listening this far. You're awesome, and I love you guys. And I'll see you in the next episode. So bye, guys. Bye.